Welcome to our podcast. Today, we're breaking down the geography, the economics, the history, and the hidden forces that created this population divide. Why is New York almost empty? And what does that tell us about America's future? Let's dive in.
So, I was looking at a satellite map of the Northeast last night, specifically New York State, and I realized something that feels almost like like a glitch in the simulation.
Like a glitch?
Yeah, total glitch, because you have this mental image of New York, right? For anyone listening, you probably picture the center of the universe. It's dense, it's loud, it's, incredibly vertical.
Oh, sure. That is the brand, certainly, the concrete jungle.
Exactly. But when you look at the actual data, not the movies, but the census numbers and the topography, New York is arguably one of the most confusing geographical paradoxes in the U.S.
It really is a fascinating duality.
Right. We are talking about a state that is arguably the most urbanized and the most wild simultaneously.
You have this massive population engine, but it is operating on a surprisingly small percentage of the actual physical hardware of the state.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking in our deep dive today. We've got a stack of reports here covering demographics, economic geography, historical settlement patterns.
It's a lot of ground to cover, literally.
It is. Because the headline isn't just that people live in cities, it's about the sheer extremity of the split. We are going to look at how history, terrain, and economics basically force millions of people into a tiny corner.
While leaving vast expanses almost completely empty.
And empty is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, I think.
It really is, because we aren't just talking about suburban sprawl or farmland here.
Right.
We are talking about genuine, deep wilderness in a state that hosts the financial capital of the world.
So let's start with the numbers, because they frankly sound made up.
They do.
New York is the fourth most populous state in the country. Depending on the census year, we are hovering right around 20 million people. That is a massive demographic footprint.
Absolutely. It's a heavyweight.
But, and I literally had to double check this source when I read it, about 2/3 of that entire population lives on just 7% of the land area.
Yep. 7%.
It's wild.
Yep. That is the core statistic that defines everything else we're going to talk about today. You have 20 million people, and you have shoved the vast majority of them into a tiny little corner.
Which implies that the other 93% of the land is hosting, what, the leftovers?
In a way, yes. It creates a lopsided map. You have extreme density in the southeast, and then this massive expanse of what is essentially a different country, both geographically and economically.
So before we get into the why, because I know the geography and the economics play a huge role here, let's define the where.
Okay.
When we say everyone is crammed into 7% of the land, that is what the sources call the downstate phenomenon. But downstate is a bit of a nebulous term if you aren't a local. How are we defining that bucket?
To really understand the density, you have to break it down by counties. Downstate in this specific demographic context is essentially the New York City metropolitan area.
Okay.
First, you have the 5 boroughs of NYC. So that's Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Staten Island. Geographically, these are just dots on the map.
Barely visible.
Right. But demographically, those 5 counties alone contain over 40% of the state's entire population.
4 out of 10 people in the whole state are squeezed into just the city limits.
Correct. But then you have to look east. You have Nassau and Suffolk counties, which make up Long Island.
And for people listening outside the U.S., Long Island sounds like, I don't know, a quaint beach community.
Exactly. It sounds like a vacation spot. But Nassau and Suffolk counties hold about 15% of the state's population.
Just to put that in perspective,
Yeah.
Isn't Long Island more populous than some actual states?
Oh, absolutely. If Long Island were its own state, it would have a larger population than about 13 or 14 other U.S. states.
That is insane.
We are talking about millions of people just on that one strip of land.
Okay, so we have 40% in the city, 15% on the island. We're already well into the majority.
Right. Then you add the lower Hudson Valley. So that's Westchester, Rockland, and Putnam counties. These are the immediate northern suburbs. That adds another 7%. When you stack those 3 regions together, city, island, lower Hudson, you get roughly 2/3 of the human beings in New York State.
And visually, on a map, that is just that little tail at the very bottom right.
It is a tiny sliver. If you were throwing darts at a map of New York, you would almost certainly miss the place where everyone actually lives.
It really paints a picture of a funnel. It's like gravity just pulled the entire population down into the ocean.
That's a good way to visualize it.
But this leaves us with the other side of the coin, which is the upstate reality.
The other 93%.
And this is where the deep dive gets really interesting for me. Because if you drive just 2 hours north of NYC...
You aren't in the suburbs anymore.
Exactly, you are in a different world. The source material describes upstate not just as rural, but as almost empty.
It creates a cognitive dissonance. You expect New York to be crowded, but there are over 20 towns in upstate New York with populations under 1,000 people.
Under 1,000.
We are talking about places where the deer population likely outnumbers the human population significantly.
But there was one specific example in the research that just stopped me cold. It frankly felt like an exaggeration. The Hamilton County case study.
Ah, yes. Hamilton County.
So lay this out for us.
Yeah.
Because this challenges the entire stereotype of the state.
Hamilton County is located in the Adirondack Mountains. And in terms of pure land mass, it is huge. It is nearly the size of the state of Delaware.
Okay, so picture Delaware. It's a functional state with cities, highways, industry. Hamilton County is that big.
But in Hamilton County, there is not a single permanent traffic light.
Wait, I need to push back on that. Not a single traffic light. Is
Literally none.
that like a technicality? Do they have blinking reds or something? Or are we saying this is literally wilderness infrastructure?
It is effectively wilderness infrastructure. There are no stoplights. You could drive for hours traversing an area the size of a U.S. state and never once have to put your foot on the brake for a red light.
That is unbelievable.
The population density is something like 3 people per square mile.
3 people. And down in the city, it's what, 27,000?
In Manhattan, it's closer to 70,000 per square mile.
Wow.
So you go from 70,000 down to 3. That isn't just a gradient. That is a cliff.
That is a completely different planet. So naturally, the question is why? Did everyone just decide they hate trees? Or is there something fundamentally uninhabitable about that 93% of the land?
It's less about people hating trees and much more about the land actively resisting habitation. This is where geography really becomes destiny. We have to look at the physical terrain.
The map itself is the barrier.
Exactly. Upstate New York is defined by 3 major geographic features: the Adirondack Mountains, the Catskills, and the influence of the Great Lakes.
Okay.
The Adirondacks aren't just rolling hills. They are rugged granite peaks. They're actually part of the Canadian Shield system, geologically speaking.
So you can't exactly lay out a nice, neat grid of streets when you're dealing with granite peaks.
It's an engineering nightmare. You can't build density on a 45-degree slope of solid rock. But even if you could build there, you still have to deal with the climate.
The winter.
The winter. And not just that it gets cold. The source specifically points to lake effect snow.
Right, I've heard this term. But explain the mechanics of it. Why is the snow different there than in, say, Boston?
So you have Lake Erie and Lake Ontario to the west. These are massive, deep bodies of water. In the early winter, the water is still relatively warm compared to the freezing air coming down from Canada.
Okay, so cold air meets warm water.
Right. That cold wind hits the warm water, picks up a massive amount of moisture, and then dumps it as snow as soon as it hits land.
So it's basically a snow machine.
It is a literal snow manufacturing belt. Places like Syracuse or Buffalo can get buried in feet of snow while New York City just gets rain.
That sounds brutal.
It is. So if you are a settler 200 years ago, or even a corporate site selector today, you look at that region, rugged mountains, dense forests, brutal winters, and you say, maybe we should stay south.
It acts as a natural filter. The geography pushes people away.
Yes.
But clearly it didn't push everyone away. People do live there.
Right.
But they just don't live there in the millions.
Correct.
So let's flip it. If the North pushes people away, what pulled everyone into that 7% sliver at the bottom? The sources mention a downstate advantage.
It's a trifecta. You have the port, the Hudson River, and the flat terrain. And you really cannot overstate the importance of the flat terrain.
It sounds kind of boring, but I guess you can't build a skyscraper on a slope.
You can't build a massive city on a slope. The area around NYC and Long Island is largely flat or gently rolling. It's the end of the glacial moraine.
Right.
That allows for the grid. It allows for warehousing, factories, train lines, and eventually the suburban sprawl we see today.
And then you have the water.
The water is the key to the entire economy. The Hudson River is unique. It's a deep, navigable river that cuts straight through the mountain barrier deep into the interior.
It's a canyon, basically.
It's a fjord, essentially. And historically, that river connected to the Erie Canal. This meant that for 100 years, if you were a farmer in the Midwest and you wanted to sell your wheat to Europe, your goods had to float down the Hudson and out through New York Harbor.
So the harbor acted as a funnel for the entire continent's economy.
Precisely. That concentration of trade created a concentration of wealth, which created a concentration of jobs, banks, insurance, shipping it all clustered at the mouth of the river.
And once that gravity is established, it's really hard to break. The jobs are there, so the people move there. The people are there, so the services open there.
It's a massive feedback loop. The downstate region became a self-sustaining economic engine fueled by its geography. Meanwhile, upstate has a different story.
And this is where we need to talk about the economics of the empty space, because the sources mentioned something that I found really compelling, the financial reality of living in the wilderness.
Yes.
It's not just that it's cold, it's that it's expensive in a way that doesn't really match the local economy.
This is a critical point that often gets overlooked. New York State acts as a single political entity. Laws passed in Albany apply to both the dense city and the rural mountains. And New York has a high-tax, high-service model.
Which, I mean, that makes sense if you're making a Manhattan salary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you are working in finance or tech down in the city, the high cost of living is offset by the high earning potential of the region. But if you are in Hamilton County...
Definitely don't have the high earning potential.
No.
Yeah.
You have a Rust Belt economy, manufacturing that has largely left, tourism, which is seasonal, or government work. But you are still operating under a state tax structure that is among the highest in the nation.
So it's a mismatch. You have Ohio-level incomes with New York-level taxes.
That is the perfect way to frame it. And the source argues that this creates a constant migration pressure. It explains why the population distribution is so sticky.
How so?
If you are young and ambitious in upstate New York, the math often tells you to move downstate. You need the downstate salary to justify the New York cost of living.
So the tax burden essentially acts as another barrier, just like the mountains. It keeps the population from spreading out.
It strongly incentivizes density. It pulls people toward the economic engine.
And this creates that death spiral for rural areas we hear about.
In a sense, yes. Think about infrastructure. If you have to pave a mile of road in Nassau County, that cost is shared by thousands of taxpayers living on that single mile.
Right.
If you have to pave a mile of road in the Adirondacks, the cost is the same, but maybe only 3 people live there.
The per capita burden is enormous.
Exactly. So the economics reinforce the geography. The mountains made it hard to settle initially, and the economic structure makes it hard to stay.
It really paints a picture of 2 states trapped inside one border. You have this hyper-dense, globally connected city-state at the bottom, and then you have this massive, scenic, struggling wilderness at the top.
And they are tethered together. That is the fundamental tension. The city needs the water and the recreation space of the north, and the north needs the tax revenue of the city. But culturally and geographically, they are oil and water.
I want to circle back to the suburbs for a second. Westchester, Rockland. You mentioned they are part of the downstate density?
Yes.
Are they just spillover? Or is there a geographic reason they are included in that habitable zone?
It goes right back to the terrain. The flatness we talked about doesn't just stop at the Bronx border. It extends up the river valley.
Oh, I see.
The population density effectively follows the topography. Where the land is flat enough to easily build a commuter rail line and a subdivision, you have density.
And where the elevation's been?
Population drops off a cliff. Literally, you can look at a contour map of New York and a population density map, and they are almost identical. The people live where the glaciers flatten the earth.
It's humbling, isn't it? We think of ourselves as masters of the universe building these massive cities, but really we are just clinging to the flat spots the ice left behind 10,000 years ago.
Geography is still the boss. We can build bridges and tunnels, but we generally don't fight the mountains if we don't have to.
So bringing this to the present day for you listening, we have this 20 million population. 2/3 are in the 7% sliver. Is this permanent? Or does the modern world change the equation?
That is the question of the century. We are seeing shifts, remote work, the ability to have a downstate salary while sitting in a cabin in Hamilton County technically breaks the economic barrier we just discussed.
Right, if I can bring my Manhattan paycheck to the mountains, suddenly the taxes aren't as crushing.
Exactly. But you still have the infrastructure deficit. Remember, no traffic lights often means spotty broadband, fewer hospitals, fewer schools.
And you still have the snow.
The snow does not care about Zoom.
It really doesn't.
So while we might see some trickling north, and we definitely saw some of that during the pandemic, the geographic fundamentals are incredibly strong. The efficiency of the city, the port, and the density is really hard to replicate in the mountains.
It seems like the empty space is destined to remain relatively empty.
which, to be fair, is its own kind of value. In a world that is increasingly crowded, having a Delaware-sized patch of silence is a resource in itself.
That is a great point. Maybe we shouldn't look at the map and see empty as a failure, but as a feature.
It's the lungs of the state.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm just left with this image of the traffic light, or the lack thereof. It's such a potent symbol.
It is. It represents a completely different way of life that exists within the exact same political boundaries as Times Square.
What should you, the listener, take away from this? Next time you look at a map of New York, what are you actually seeing?
I think you should see the struggle between human ambition and physical reality. We built the greatest city in the world where the land allowed us to, and where the land fought back the mountains, the snow belts we backed off.
Right.
The map of New York isn't just political lines. It's a record of that negotiation with nature.
And it forces us to ask a bigger question about the future.
Yeah.
As the economy becomes more digital.
Remote work and all that.
Exactly. Will those political borders essentially become obsolete? Will the tension between the empty North and the dense South eventually snap?
It's definitely possible. If the economic interests drift too far apart, the political marriage becomes very strained. We are already seeing some of that polarization.
2 states, 1 border.
And a whole lot of snow in between.
But here is something else for you to think about. Something we didn't really touch on today. We talk about how the flat coastal land pulled everyone south, right?
Yeah.
Well, what happens when those sea levels start to rise? You have 13 million people packed at sea level on that 7% of land.
That's a huge vulnerability.
And just to the north, you have this massive, empty, elevated landmass with literally thousands of freshwater lakes and cooler temperatures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Will climate change and the search for fresh water be the thing that finally reverses a 400-year-old migration pattern?
Yeah.
Will the empty 93% suddenly become the most valuable real estate in the country?
That is a fascinating thought to leave on.
Well, this has completely changed how I visualize the Northeast. From the crammed subways of the 7% to the silent forests of Hamilton County.
It's a wild map once you really look at it.
Thanks for helping us unpack it. And to you listening, maybe take a drive up north. Go find that spot without the traffic light. Just make sure you bring snow tires.
Serious snow tires.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.